And welcome to another edition of Montreal Hockey Now podcast with your host, me, Jimmy Murphy, and my co-host, Marco D'Amico. And joining us is my good friend, Luc Gelinas from RDS. I'm sure you Canadiens fans know him well from there. And we'll get right into it, guys. I mean, the much anticipated for a long time, Carey Price return happens tonight on Friday, on Good Friday, actually. Carey Price returns to the lineup against the New York Islanders, his first start since Game 5 of the 2021 Stanley Cup Final last July. Luc, I'll start with you right now. Just your thoughts overall on what this means for Carey and for the team right off the bat.
I think that's really important for him after his surgery. He didn't play for almost 300 days, and that's important to play, go through a game, and see how he feels the day after. If he can play 3-4 games before the end of the season, he might go for the summer. That's going to be a long summer. May, June, July, August, 4 full months before the training camp. So he will be in peace with his knee, and he will be ready for next season. And that's important for the management too. I think they need to sit with him. Mm-hmm. He's 34. He's an elite player. I'm sure he can come back as an elite level and see with him the situation. If he wants to stay here with the rebuild process, if the management want to keep him too in that rebuild process, and if he's healthy, it's easier to make some decisions during the summertime.
Yeah, well, Marco wrote a good piece earlier this week in anticipation of this return, and just kind of laying out the scenarios that could happen. And as you just said there, one of them is, I mean, and I know Canadiens fans don't like to hear that, but it's a very realistic chance that he can get traded. Marco, I'll let you get a little more into what you wrote there and kind of give the viewers here and listeners kind of an idea of what the Canadiens' options are right now.
Yeah, well, I mean, it stems with Carey Price. I think him coming back this now is important in all forms of the decision, because a healthy Carey Price allows you to move ahead with, the dominoes. And so having a healthy Carey Price, you have two questions to ask. One, do you want to stick around for this rebuild? And two, is there even a rebuild if Carey Price is around? Because you can't really finish low if you have Carey Price in net. I mean, it happened in 2018, but there was a long list of injuries then too. And they won a lottery to pick high that year in drafting Jesperi Kotkaniemi. So it is extremely difficult, especially with the way that Arizona and Seattle have built their teams, to envision them being a basement team next year if Carey Price is in nets the full season. So you have a direction, you have to ask him what he wants, and then your decisions come from there. If he doesn't necessarily want to stick around and would prefer to run for a cup, well, then you got to do everything in your power to accommodate. Retain salary, take back contracts, do what you got to do. But, Carey Price deserves a Stanley Cup. He's one of those last players. Joe Thornton comes to mind as well, that deserve that Stanley Cup. And so once a decision is taken on that, then you move to the rest of the goaltending situation. If you keep Carey Price, do you need Jake Allen? Can you go with Samuel Montembeault? Because we know that Jake Allen was a very sought-after asset leading up to the trade deadline. He's got 1 year at less than $3 million, and we can clearly see he can play a number one role, a 1A or a 1B, or be a backup, to a younger up-and-coming goalie. Like, for example, in Toronto, if you're going to re-sign Jack Campbell, you're going to want a decent backup to back him up when things get heavy. That's an option there. So you look at the options. Jake Allen becomes a trade piece if you keep Carey Price, just like Jake Allen becomes indispensable if you do trade Carey Price. So one leads to the other. And then obviously the question with Samuel Montembeault, what do you do with that? I think that Samuel Montembeault stated he wants to stay. I believe him. I think everybody would like for him to stay. I think he's performed admirably given the team that's played in front of him. And again, we saw it the last few nights. He battles and he gives the team a chance to win every game. So to me, he's a guy from here. He's a guy that grew up wanting to be Canadians. The Canadiens picked him off waivers. I think it would be great to bring a guy like him back. And again, all of this stems from Carey Price. I think the only sure thing from an organizational perspective in net is that Caden Primo needs to play the entire season next year in Laval.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was just going to say, I noticed one name you hadn't mentioned there, and you got right to it there. That's Primo. Look, Marco, I've told you this, and we reported it as well in that story, is that when the Canadiens, I was told from a pretty reliable source, a guy that does a lot of scouting, I'll just put it that way. He told me that when the Canadiens were scouting the St. Louis Blues, excuse me, when the Canadiens were scouting St. Louis Blues, heading into the deadline, they weren't necessarily just scouting for the deadline. They were scouting, looking ahead to free agency too. And there's a big UFA out of St. Louis if he reaches it, and that's Ville Husso. And he's had, I mean, let's say he's been one of the top 10 goalies in the league this year, and he's still without a contract. If and when you find out that Carey Price wants to be traded or he'll agree to a trade, would he not be a good guy to bring in at age 27? I don't know what he's going to command, but it's his first time out on the market. Would he be a good guy to come in that can give you a good, legit chance to win? And also you get your guys below him developing as well. What do you think, Luc?
I really don't know. All the situation depends on Carey Price. If he stays or if he leaves, it's going to be really interesting. But like Marco said, if Carey Price is here, maybe the rebuild is not over, but this team can win. So if Carey Price is not here, there's no urgency to win next season. Just want to have a decent team, keep building, developing the young players. And that might be a tough maybe year at the blue line because I'm sure Caden Primo will be there. Jordan Harris deserves to be here too, I think. Maybe Barron. Don't forget Romanov is only 22, and that's going to be his fourth season in the league next year. So that's going to be important to have a really good goalie. But who knows? It's tough to predict, I guess. But I totally agree with what Marco said earlier, 100%.
Yeah, the thing I think about, though, and the key here, too, though, is what Kent Hughes and Jeff Gordon have expressed before on more than one occasion, that this isn't going to be your typical rebuild, that they do want to delve into the free agent market. What that means, we won't know until we get there.
And if you're a free agent, do you want to come to Montreal for the rebuild process?
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. You see what they did, though, Gordon did with the Rangers. They sent a letter out and said, we're blowing it all up. It's going to be a long, painful rebuild. And then 2 years later, they sign Artemi Panarin. I don't see the Canadiens necessarily doing something that extreme. I think they could be competitive, though. A lot more competitive than maybe people think. What do you think, Marco?
I think we also have to take into consideration that when Gordon penned that letter versus when Panarin was signed, different moves occurred. Like they traded for Jacob Trouba, right? They sacrificed a first-round pick to go and get a top four right shot defenseman. So right off the bat, you're like, I don't necessarily think they want to tank, even though they won the lottery. I mean, that was by chance. But then you wind up with a guy like Panarin as well. And then you slowly have Zibanejad is there and Kreider comes into his own. And so like the pieces were coming together, just like right now with the Canadiens, the pieces are coming together. You have Caulfield that's scoring at will. You have Suzuki, who's been a point per game center for basically the last 35 games. So I could see the desire. And then obviously there's the St. Louis effect. I mean, we heard it from Vincent Lecavalier's mouth when he joined the Canadiens. The reason he didn't sign with Montreal was because he was more impressed with Peter Laviolette in Philadelphia than he was with Michel Therrien in Montreal. Yeah. And so the Martin St. Louis effect is going to be a thing because people are going to look at how he helped guys like Rem Pitlick, how he's helped Alexander Romanov, how he's helped Christian Dvorak find their games when previously throughout this year they were dwindling. And I think that's what they're going to pay attention to in the style of play. So that could be the de facto change.
Luc, you've worked through many seasons covering the Montreal Canadiens. I want to get is this maybe one of, if not the most important off seasons they've had?
It's tough because they have no margin with the cap. So they cannot sign free agents like that. If they sign free agents, they have to move some contracts like Jeff Petrie, Brendan Gallagher, Jonathan Drouin, Shea Weber. So I'm not that sure that's an important summer. I think it's a process. There are a lot of good young players. It's not like they start from scratch, but they are not going to win and be a contender right away this next year with Suzuki and Caulfield and Romanov and Evans and Goulet. I think that's going to take a few more years. So I don't think the next summer is all the summers are important, but I believe that's not a really, really important summer like maybe it was like 2 years ago.
Yeah, and what's been your take on Marty St. Louis? I mean, did he surprise you, or what you
Yeah.
knew of him? Yeah, I think
Yeah,
yeah,
they
I
didn't
think
expect.
everyone's
He's really good, and like Marco said, all the players are better under him. You look at
uh-huh.
all the guys individually, they play a better hockey game since he's there. But I think the effect it's almost gone now. They play for a coach. They only won 4 in the last 15 games, but this week it was tougher because I felt like they gave up in Columbus and they played a bad game against Winnipeg. They were lucky Samuel Montembeault was playing really well that night, but that's the first time they played 2 bad games in a row. So I mean, lucky Samuel Montembeault was so I think that the effect of having a new coach now is gone. Now they play for a coach they appreciate and they respect, and is still really really good. But don't forget the players he has. There's
Yeah,
Graham Petlick who we like him, but he costs nothing. Montembeault costs nothing. That's not a great team.
yeah.
Yeah, we have to be honest. Harris is a rookie. Schumannen, same thing.
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it's look. You look at this team too, and on so many nights since he's been hired, they amaze you. I mean, they're fun to watch, and it's to be able to make a team in a lost season like this, and considering the way things had gone before he got to be able to draw fans back into the building, to draw the media to start paying attention. I know it's Montreal; you're always going to pay attention to the Canadians, but you know what I mean. To start talking positive about them. I didn't see that happening back in January when I took over Montreal Hockey Now, and then like, man, I'm walking into a funeral here. But now it doesn't feel like a funeral, you know. It feels like maybe a good Irish wake here and there, but it's not what I expected. It's been fun, and look, I'm
Yeah, you're
covering
right.
teams at once, and you know the other team I keep an eye on is the Bruins, and obviously they're headed for the playoffs. But honestly, in the last couple months, I've had more fun when I'm doing my Canadian stuff than I have when I'm doing the Bruins, because it's just they playing an exciting brand of hockey again, and they're giving a sense of optimism, which is great. But listen, I want to get in, and we'll get back to the Canadians in a bit. But obviously on Friday, we all heard some horrible news. Mike Bossy passes away, just a legendary player from you guys' neck of the woods there, from Laval. And just one of the best. I mean, not one. Obviously, one of the top 5 goal scorers ever, and just everything he did on and off the ice. I didn't know him personally, but I did have a good story. The old right. I don't know if you remember Luke Russ Conway.
Yeah.
Yeah, you
Boston,
remember?
yeah.
Yeah. So one time, Russ was telling me a story. I mean, Russ would tell me so many stories. I was really close with him. I miss him. And you know, he started talking. I don't know how we were talking about Mike Bossy, but anyhow, he said, you know, one time he was in a pub with him after a game, and he was asking him, how do you just have that release? You know, we've seen the pure goal scorers do it. You could argue that he had the quickest release. It was almost like he was almost already shooting before the puck even got there, and he knew where it was going to. He said, "Where does that come from?" And Bossy said, "Well, half of it's pure bleeping luck, and half of it is practice." I thought that was one of the best quotes. He's just saying, "Look, I mean, I'm not saying I'm not good, but at the same time, a lot of it is luck." But he, you know, he talked about how he used to practice in his driveway and just shoot pucks and pucks and pucks until the sun would go down, and just seemed like a really good guy. And I just was looking at some of the stats, you know, today when people were talking about it. You start looking, you're like, wow, man. I mean, this was one of these guys, and we don't necessarily have this anymore in the game, right? You've got Ovechkin, and maybe now you can put Matthews in that category as well with the goals he's scoring this year. But this is one of these guys where you just knew every year he was going to hit the 50 goal mark. I don't know what you remember of him as a reporter, as just a fan, Luke. If you could just talk a bit about Mike Bossy.
I met him a couple of times for interviews, or I was at the same place at the same moment, had a little conversation, but I was not close to him. But you know, he works on the radio network. He works for TVA, the other sports network here, and I have plenty of friends with TVA, and every time they talk about Mike Bossy, just good words. Like this guy is a really good person. The way he behaved with people remind me of Jacques Demers. Because Jacques loves everybody. He wants to be there to help everybody, listen. So I think Mike Bossy is the same kind of guy. The story you told about Ross Conway, Robert Laflamme from NHL.com, but the French website, wrote a story this morning about the fact he went to hockey school in Laval and Mike Bossy was there. And for him, that was a turning point in his hockey career, like at 10 years old, because at that time he started to cheers for the Islanders instead of the Habs. And at the beginning of his speech, Mike Bossy said, I'm going to give you a tip, guys, at the end, a really important secret about being a good scorer. And the secret was shoot anywhere. Because if you don't know where you're going to shoot, the goalie cannot know too. So that wasn't the secret. But for him as a kid, he was like, wow, I'm going to shoot anywhere and I'm going to score. So
yeah,
it's almost the same story as the one.
Exactly. A lot of coaches say, right? They always say, hey, only good things can happen if you shoot, right? I mean, if you bounce off the boards, you get a good ricochet, you could get a rebound. So never pass up a shot, like Wayne Gretzky always said, right? I mean, Marco, you're a little younger. I don't know what memories you have.
I don't, but I could tell you some fun ones. I mean, you talk about him always practicing. My dad was one of the goalies he would shoot on at the rink in Laval.
Oh yeah. Wow.
My dad was not a good goalie, but I mean, he just needed a body in net, and they would just practice and shoot. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe the manager of the rink eventually became his father-in-law. And so, when you look at how he impacted hockey in Laval and basically the greater Montreal region, like if I'm not mistaken, in junior he played in Laval as well for the Nationals. And I remember my grandmother telling me, because it was my grandfather's favorite player. He was pissed that they drafted Mark Napier instead of Mike Bossy, because Mike Bossy was the hometown guy. Everybody was going crazy for him. And so when they eventually didn't, my grandfather made it a point, and they went to his last game in Laval. There's a picture actually online right now surfacing of Mike Bossy with his two parents at the Colisée in Laval for that last game. It was surreal. I mean, he's synonymous. I grew up in Laval. My dad grew up in Laval, and he was the guy. Obviously, then Martin St. Louis came around, and he lived a block away from me, so things kind of shifted. But for that generation in the 80s, he was the guy. He was the most efficient goal scorer, and had it not been for his back injury, we wouldn't be talking about Wayne Gretzky's scoring record. We'd be talking about Mike Bossy's scoring record, because Wayne Gretzky may have the goals, but Mike Bossy has the best goals per game average in the history of the NHL.
Yeah. And did you see Gretzky's tweet today too? There's a picture of him and Bossy on
Team Canada.
Team Canada, yeah. And I didn't realize that that must have been, I think it was 1984. It was that team. But yeah, he was something. Now I saw him play once at the old Boston Garden when I must have only been about 8 years old, so I don't remember too much of it. But yeah, he was something else. He was. But let's get back to current times here, and going forward, Luc. We talked about there are a lot of question marks, but what you've taken from the St. Louis era so far, it's a very short one. What do you like? What's the biggest trait that you've noticed come out in the players, or the biggest quality that maybe he's instilled in that locker room?
It's unbelievable, the respect he got in the dressing room. And the thing that impressed me the most, it's the fact that he can talk to all the players, and he'd been in the same situation earlier in his career. He was a guy that never been drafted. He was a guy who was working really hard to get a chance in the NHL. He was a fourth-line player. He played on power play, on penalty killing, and then he was a superstar, one of the best players on the planet. And then a guy was getting old and wanted to stay in the league. So every time he talked to a guy, he can feel how the guy is in the same moment. So he earned a lot of respect. All the players listen to him, and he has a great ability of giving confidence to his players and freedom on the ice, but at the same time being responsible too as well. So that's really, really impressive. By the way, I apologize for my accent from Shawinigan, and I know my English is far from perfect. I don't do a lot of English podcasts and stuff like that because I know I'm poor, but you're my friend.
Yeah.
And I was not able to say no. I cannot say no to Jimmy Murphy.
Hey, and also too, my French needs a lot of improvement as well. But one of these days, I'm going to come up there and shock you guys and start.
And I think you can testify. My English is much better after 2-3 beers.
It is, of course. And we'll have to test that English during the draft week, eh? Speaking of guys, hey, that's going to be really exciting, huh? I mean, having the draft in Montreal, of course, they lost out on it because of COVID, but the fact that it's going to happen now, I mean, I'll tell you, thankfully, our boss is taking care of our lodging there and our travel, but I was just breezing through because I was thinking about maybe staying a few extra nights. And man, did the hotel prices go up in Montreal. They are skyrocketing right now.
Oh, yeah.
But it's the first summer since COVID started that I think people are going to be out and enjoying themselves. And you've been to plenty of drafts. I've been trying to tell Marco what a great time it is and what a great networking time it is. But also, I think one thing I've noticed, and I'm sure you can attest to this, Luc, is it's almost become a bigger trade deadline than the actual trade deadline, right? I mean, it's like that's when all the trades are made. So now I look at it for Jeff Gorton and Kent Hughes, and with everything going on and the Carey Price situation and all the contracts, like, man, they are just going to be like the center of the hockey universe. And to have it right there in their town with multiple first-round picks, that's pretty cool. I mean, that's going to be an exciting time. I think it's going to be great for the city, but great for the team as well.
I'm anxious to see if they are going to be able to swing some contract. Like Weber, like Petrie, maybe Drouin. Maybe they can do a 2-for-1. Take Weber, but take Drouin, or take maybe they have retained a portion of the salary. That's gonna be really interesting. Yeah, and for the kids, for all the agents, the managers, everybody's in town. You're right. That's a 2-3, maybe 4 days. Really, really interesting. All the time. All the time.
Marco, how's psyched to you?
I'll tell you what. I've spoken to 3/4 of the first round already, and they're psyched.
Yeah, Marco's doing a great job with these prospects.
I spoke to Logan Cooley last week, and he's just like, I haven't been to Montreal since I was like 12, and I'm raring to go. Matthew Savoy in Winnipeg is raring to go. These players are psyched that this draft is going to be live. I think it's going to be great, but as you pointed out, I think it's going to be, and Elliot Friedman also kind of alluded to this. It's going to be a wild summer because teams didn't do much this year in terms of player movement, more than what we thought they would do, but they didn't do a lot of big trades because of the cap, obviously. But what happens right before the draft is the first buyout window. And that's when a lot of the surprises in this league happen, is the buyout window. We've seen some major contracts. Keith Yandel. I never thought Keith Yandel would get bought out by the Florida Panthers. He got bought out. What did that do? It allowed the Florida Panthers to go and trade for Sam Reinhart. So you're going to see a lot of that, I think, leading up to this draft specifically, because now we know, hey, escrow is probably going to end 2 years from now, as the NHL has said. We can forecast accordingly and spend accordingly. And I think teams are going to be aggressive in trying to get the players they want now so they can fit them in their salary structure then.
That must have been tough for GMs. I mean, you think about it, like with so much uncertainty and the way things kept going like this and just changing. And you're looking at it like, well, how the heck am I supposed to do this? And I don't have the time to do it, but can you imagine if you sat down right now, right, and you went over every transaction since COVID began? It must be astronomical, because look at all the different types of trends. You would put guys on IR just to free up space to make a move for one day, and then just stuff like that. So many crazy moves like that were going on. So yeah, it's going to be good now that they get to go into a draft, like you said, within the buyout window with a much clearer picture. I think it's going to be great for them. Before we let you go, though, Luc, I want to ask you: has anyone heard from Dominic Ducharme?
No, not at all.
I was wondering about that the other day. Yeah, do you think he resurfaces with another team or what?
I have to be honest, I don't think so.
Yeah.
I think he's a junior coach. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. That's a fair assessment. It's not insulting. You're just telling the truth. I mean,
or a really good assistant coach.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that, right? I mean, it is what it is. But man, night and day in terms of asking questions of Marty to him. It was like pulling needles, and I'm like, dude, this is so hard to watch. And sometimes I thought, during those times right before he got fired, he almost seemed like, he was one of those hostages in the hostage videos being told what to say. And he's just it was tough to watch.
And he was really good with us when we asked questions. We got the answers, honest answers all the time. He was explaining the situation. Thing is, I'm not sure if the message was the same thing in the dressing room, and if the players accept the message at that time from him.
Yeah.
From what I heard.
Yeah, I heard some bad scores too. I did too.
But I like him. I hope he's gonna bounce back somewhere.
Yeah, I hope he does too.
Great guy.
I'll tell you too. Now we're just talking coaching here. Going back to St. Louis, I find it interesting too. Like we always see when teams get a new coach, right? They get that bump and they play well for about 5, 7, maybe 10 games max.
Yeah, like Vancouver.
Yeah, exactly. But then they kind of even out, right? We haven't really seen that. I mean, I know that they're still losing, and that the last game was nothing to write home about. But at the same time, it's like the effort's there every night, no matter what, win or lose. And as I said earlier, the excitement's there. And Marco, I think you've seen it. I mean, you pay more attention to like the prospects, and you can see that in these kids that are coming up, how much they're embracing it and buying into, eh?
I mean, Montreal, I believe it was against Tampa Bay, iced their youngest defensive core in the last 35 years when they had 3 rookies in their lineup plus sophomore Romanov. So just take that into consideration. The only player over the age of 30 on their blue line was David Savard.
Wow.
Yeah. So when I look at this season, the Canadiens have the record officially as of Monday for the most amount of games lost to injury in the history of the NHL for one season. They're now close to 700 games lost to injury. When you look at that, you look at the players they've lost, you look at how they've lost them, and you look at how they're losing them down the stretch. And we know that a lot of these players are playing injured. Nick Suzuki hasn't attended practice in 2 weeks. Josh Anderson is treatment, no treatment, out of the lineup, in the lineup, game time decision, we'll see. And Jeff Petrie is most likely not at 100% either. So
Montembeault is not 100%.
No, Montembeault's been playing with a bad hand, I think, since January.
Yeah.
So you can see that, and despite that, it's exciting hockey. And so yes, the results aren't there, but they don't have the players to execute that at a level that will allow them to beat elite teams on a regular basis yet. But when you've built the mentality and you've built the culture, then you go and find the players that fit that culture so that you can execute that game properly. And I think that's what this summer and the next couple of years are going to be.
Yeah, and the show is interesting. Like you said, both of you, they're competing. So they're not losing by 5-6 goals anymore like it was in October, November, December. They are close all the time. And we can see in the ratings, like in December, January, the ratings were really, really bad.
Flat
for RDS, for TVA. Now the ratings are pretty decent for games means nothing.
Yeah.
You got to have an exciting style.
Yeah, and you brought up, I think it was you, Luc, earlier, talking about just a regular off season, right? That's going to help these veterans too. Like we're talking about Price, but let's look at some of the other veterans too.
Gallagher.
Gallagher and Petrie if he stays, and like think about what. Not just the Canadiens. Think about what NHL players have been through the last 2 years. And, hey, let's include the media in there, too. We haven't had a break. I mean, for what? We've had like a month break, it feels like. People are always like, oh, you must be getting a lot of free time with COVID and everything. I'm like, what are you talking about? I feel like I've been in this 2-year-long season. Sometimes it's just like one long season to me. And that's how the players, I imagine, feel as well. So now to kind of have that normalcy back, and to be able to go home, have some downtime, do some vacationing with the family, go golfing, whatever they want to do, go surfing, who knows. But to have that will be both mentally and physically huge for the Canadiens and for every NHL team. And I think we're going to see that on the ice next year when the training camp arrives. You're going to see just right away a rejuvenated team. Guys, before we go, I want to ask one quick question too, and I mentioned them just now. The Petrie situation. I'll start with you, Luc. He hasn't, by all accounts, I haven't heard anyone report it, The trade request is still out there. He still wants to get traded. Can they trade him? And what do you think they can get for him?
It's tough to trade Jeff Petrie because of the nature of his contract. But I think the problem was not with the team, the management, or the system, or the coach. Of course, he was not pleased with Dominique Duchamp, but it was more related to the situation in the province of Quebec with the COVID restrictions. And as a father, a husband, might be tough for me to spend like 3-4 months without my family. So I understand it was tough for him. It was tough for his wife too. I travel across America, USA and Canada, and it's right. It's tougher here. In Columbus, there's no mask anymore. You can go to a restaurant anywhere. I feel okay with the situation. I respect that, but I can understand people who find that really tough. So let's see. I think I don't know the word in English, but in French it's réconciliation, or I believe there's nothing broken. In fact, maybe things can clear here in the province of Quebec. Pandemic is almost over, and they're going to need good veterans at the blue line. They have only Savard and Edmondson, and if Petrie can stay, I think that's going to be good for the team, good for him. So that my wish is that going to find a way to fix the problem and start on a blank page next season.
Yeah. Marco?
Yeah, I agree. I think the COVID situation was what prompted a lot of this desire to move out. And obviously the limitations in Quebec have been reduced, and it doesn't look like they're going to be reimposed anytime soon. And like we said, yeah, absolutely. The damage has been done. I mean, we talk about this season, but last season the Canadiens were in a bubble, right? They couldn't see their families until, what was it, the Stanley Cup final or the semifinal? I apologize. So again, it was a full year then, and he's got 3 young sons and another on the way. And then you factor in this season, I can understand it. And we know for a fact that there are teams that were interested that simply just couldn't make the money work. So it was a question of timing in my honest opinion. I think that, as we talked about before, the buyout period, a lot of contracts coming up. You look at a team like Dallas, there's no way they're going to be able to afford a guy like John Klingberg. Maybe they circle back to a guy like Jeff Petrie, who knows Jim Nill quite well, and whom Jim Nill has shown interest in when he was in Detroit. That's an option. LA is another option. They desperately need a right shot defenseman because they're just left shots. They're playing Jordan Spence and Sean Dursey, who are left-handed shots, on the right side right now in LA, with Drew Doughty injured. So that's another team, and the Bergevin connection is there as well. There's a few teams that could use a 40-point mobile defenseman in Jeff Petrie, and I don't think you just forget how to play hockey. And in fact, under Martin St. Louis, he's scoring at a 47-point pace for a defenseman. And I understand his contract. I totally understand his contract. But if Montreal is able to take back another contract, then the vicinity of $3 to $4 million to make it work in order to get assets for Jeff Petrie, yeah, I think that's a trade that's going to happen. And stranger things have happened. Milan Lucic was traded. Jeff Petrie can get traded.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's a great point. All right, guys. Well, listen, Luke, I appreciate you taking the time. We finally made it happen. Sorry about the last time we were in the bar there and we couldn't.
Hey, no problem. No problem.
Maybe we'll do that in person in McLean's one time soon. I would love.
I wish so.
Yeah, I hope so too. So that's Luc Gelinas from RDS. He's Marco D'Amico. I'm Jimmy Murphy. This has been another edition of the Montreal Hockey Now podcast.